over
Actually,
10.
this is
It
episode
should be
10.
the
I should be
easiest
fine.
one.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Let's start again. So, thanks, Vincent, for jumping on the security space. This is episode 10 now. The chosen topic for today, we'll be talking about what a cybersecurity culture looks like in 2023. But before we get into it, do you want to give us a quick background to yourself, Vincent?
Sure. So I'm the head of InfoSec at FundApps, which is a fintech based in Shoreditch, in London, in the UK. And we provide services to all kinds of financial institutions across the world. And therefore, that means that our clients have high expectations on how we manage their data that they trust us with.
Okay.
So yeah, that's it. I've been working in cybersecurity for the past 15 years. And and I joined FundApps nearly 4 years ago now.
Perfect. Okay. And have you done any podcasts before? Any public speaking like that before?
No, I guess yeah, not really. So I guess this is my first go at it.
Cool. So, probably the best place to start, and I start them all off with sort of definitions anyway. So, obviously, people in the industry might understand what a security culture is, but maybe not everybody. So, could you actually define sort of like what a security culture is?
Basically, in a nutshell, is that the fact that social security culture is like any other culture. It's about how we behave, and it's a number of beliefs and norms that we have in a group, which defines how we interact. I guess that's culture in general, and security culture just is that element in how it pertains to cybersecurity world, especially in any kind of group, but especially in a company, which is kind of what we're talking about today. So yeah, that's about it.
Okay. So what necessarily does a good security culture look like? And maybe play that off with, what does a bad security culture look like?
Yeah, I think to talk about good and bad, I guess the first thing to look at is what does it bring? What can it bring if you have a good security culture? And I think the way of looking at it is, first of all, 8 out of 10 security breaches, depending on whose statistic or study you look at, have a human element to it. That means that obviously the way people behave in a company is going to have a tremendous impact on whether you get a security incident or a security breach or not. And then the other part of it is, I think it's the National Protective Security Authority who listed a number of benefits you can expect when you have a strong security culture. And amongst others, the ones which stood out for me were about how you could engage your workforce, and take responsibility for security issues. And then the other part, which I thought made a lot of sense, was the fact that employees were more likely to act in a security conscious manner. And I think that, again, if one needs to look at reasons why to engage with a strong security culture, those 2 points around getting staff engagement and having staff who are more likely to respond in a security conscious way sounds like a great thing to have in any company.
Yep. So you, as a CISO or any CISO in that matter, can you even operate in a company that has a bad security culture? Can you still be an efficient team without having the culture, or is that just an absolute given? No, if you don't have the culture in there, if the mindset's not right with your staff, then you're fighting a losing battle. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, again, I think I'll go back to that statistic. If 8 out of 10 security incidents have some kind of human aspect in it, then obviously creating a space where people will act in a security conscious way is going to make a big difference. And often what I've seen is that traditionally like security teams have been taking the problem in the wrong way, and for a number of reasons, they have a tendency to have something more close to a command and control culture. With things where you typically with lack of transparency, for example, or where you would see a lack of trust in the people in the organization, or having a tendency to make decisions without consulting the rest of the company. And that's when we hear often, yes, it's this decision has been taken in an ivory tower. That's not the expression. Nick, can you help me out? What's the expression around the ivory tower that you guys use in England?
Oh, it kind of is, to be fair. Yeah, up there in your ivory tower, like it's kind of like they're a little bit out of touch.
Exactly.
So yeah, I get what you're saying.
And I think that's definitely something you hear often, or I've heard often, about security teams being out of touch with what's actually happening, on the ground.
Yeah, but you said something there, Vincent. I just want to pull you back on, and is that lack of trust. Now, sometimes as a naive outsider, sometimes you need that lack of trust because it's kind of keeping people in cybersecurity a job by not appreciating cybersecurity, if that makes sense. I say it very, very naively. So what do you actually mean by that lack of trust? Because surely you need an organization to have that lack of trust so that you can actually pay your bills and have a job. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's the way, it sounds like kind of logical in a way that a security team would be the least trusting entity in the company. But actually, I think that actually brings more problems than it solves them. Yeah. So if we kind of look at it and dig a bit deeper into this, yeah, if as a security team you look at your staff in the company as being 12-year-olds who've been handed a smartphone for their first time in their life, and that who are going to go around and create havoc and break everything in your company, then what it means is that you're going to start to put in place boundaries, controls, guardrails everywhere, because you're scared of what they might click on, do, etc., etc. And in the end, what you're going to create is basically some kind of, first of all kinds of frictions within the company, where people can't go by their days and do their jobs because you've put in place a number of controls. And slowly, by treating them as children rather than adults, you're kind of ingraining this idea in their head that if they can do something because it's not blocked or it's not filtered or whatever, then it must be fine, because otherwise it would have been blocked by the security team. And you're kind of pushing them to stop thinking about the decisions they make and just behave a bit like a toddler would. And I think that's very that creates a lot of problems down the line. And as I said, on one side, by doing that, you've created a lot of friction. So potentially you're making people unhappy, and it's hard for them to do their jobs. And on the other side, when a real threat actor comes along, they've completely switched off their they've stopped
Initiative,
analyzing
kind of.
critically.
Yeah.
And therefore what happens is it becomes really easy to kind of abuse them.
So just a question on that, and sorry if it is a bit left field, is that because we're going into the realms of human versus AI here, and that's a whole other podcast in itself. But it's like, you can't put a price on the fact of that human behavior and the fact that we can understand context behind threats and anything like that. So is that what you're saying? Is that the value of that should not be underestimated, and we should actually be pushing the fact that we are humans, we can think outside the box, we can use our continuous learning that, oh, I learned that on a threat there that I can bring into this threat here. Is that kind of what you're saying? It's promoting, and that's why AI will never fully take over, hopefully.
I'm not too sure about whether AI will take over or not, but I think it's that thing where if you try and think of all the bad things or of all the security issues there could be by clicking on a link, visiting another website, doing a specific thing within your environment, you're necessarily going to miss some use cases. So therefore, it's much more powerful to actually explain to people what you're trying to achieve, what the risks are, and have them, think about this as they go by their days. Obviously, you should never do exclusively one or the other. Both of these can come in together, but completely relying on technical controls and taking and kind of distrusting people and not allowing them also to be critical about what they're doing, I think is dangerous.
Okay, so let me throw this hypothetical scenario at you then. Obviously, you're a CISO at the moment, and let's just say that you were a CISO of an online retailer, a fruit shop, for example. One of your staff has essentially leaked by accident by clicking on a, perhaps a phishing link or anything like that. They've leaked sort of, the price of their products, the price it was from the supplier and the margin of this, and therefore obviously it's bad reputation for the company because this got leaked and it went viral, and it's a really bad reputational hit for the company. Firstly, how do you respond to that? And necessarily, could you put a cultural sort of obviously focus on it? How do you sort of treat the employee that clearly has done it by mistake, but then how do you kind of come back from that reputational hit? What would you do?
Sure. I think this is typically an example where we can see, depending on your culture, two companies dealing with this completely differently. And, in what we were talking about, the command and control type organization, this is typically where you'd expect behaviors like, okay, well, let's fire this individual because they've created a security incident for the company. So, there's nothing good that can be expected from them. And let's, if they've, let's kind of then block everything that the other team members can do, because if they've went to this website or clicked something, then that means humans can't be trusted, and therefore let's just reduce the freedom that these people had, and therefore that will fix our problem. And I think this is an example of us taking us in the path of creating more friction and actually not trying to understand the underlying problem of how this person ended up creating a security incident or leaking some data. And I think a more we're going to talk about alternatives to this command and control culture, and I think typically something which is more open, which is more transparent, which is more trustworthy, would allow you to try to understand why this came to be. And that's where working with maybe the team in which this person belongs to, understanding what they do, what's their usual way of working, and taking down what are the areas which are risky, what are they doing right now, and how could they work differently so as to address the risks that exist today. I think that's a much not only a better way of doing it, but also something which is more collaborative, which allows the staff in your company to say, hey, actually putting my thinking hat on, I see how when we do this and that, this is where problems can arise, and let's address these completely, rather than the security team slamming down a new list of security controls and making everyone's life harder.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. And I'm going to throw a question at you that I've asked on previous podcasts actually, just to kind of see your view on it as well. And it is, what would you say to the phrase that humans are the cause and the cure of pretty much 95% of everything wrong in sort of in security?
Well, I think they're definitely the cure and the cause. I think that's accurate. But I mean, without humans, until AI takes over, without humans, there wouldn't be anything, at
Yep.
least in terms of cybersecurity. So I think what's important is more to recognize, yes, humans can make mistakes, are susceptible to social engineering, to all kinds of things which allow adversaries to take to gain access to our systems. But actually, a better way of thinking is looking at how can we, through education, but also through making people's lives easier, how can we reduce that threat and allow people to get by their days, be happy, get their jobs done without making it an absolutely hell company to work out, because you basically, every time they want to do something, they have to get 3 levels of approval.
Yep. Well, just to touch on that then. So, how do you make sure your team at FundApps, it isn't a hellish place to work? How have you, like, rather than be theoretical, talk to me about your war stories. Talk to me about how you embed a security culture at FundApps.
Yeah, so I think so. At FundApps, first of all, the security culture is a reflection of the general culture that we have in the company. And for me, that was very important from the get-go, is understand how do people work at FundApps and how can we adapt this to the security world. And that's hasn't necessarily been always easy, because how do you kind of reconcile something like a very open culture with something, as we've been talking about, security, which obviously has an objective of keeping information safe and secure. So the way we've done it is, on one side, going back to this collaboration piece, I think it's a very important aspect to get everyone to be part of the security team, rather than say, the security team is made of 1 or 2 people. It only can work if everyone is part of it. And that means specifically has meant creating groups like the security champions that we have at FundApps, and which is made of a number of engineers who have all day jobs, but have a particular interest in cybersecurity, and allowing them to kind of shape the way we do security at FundApps has meant that it's given them a voice, but it's also allowed me to get a better understanding of some of the security challenges they have in their everyday work, which I couldn't see unless I do specifically their job, and having them feed back and actually implement or bring some security initiatives. And one of them has been our security coding challenges, where every month we run a challenge where every engineer can participate, and those who are the best at writing secure code kind of win prizes, and they can, and just transforming this into something a bit more fun and that everyone can participate to.
Yeah. Sorry, Vince.
I was going to say, I have another great example is this idea that every security initiative has to come from the security team. That's something that I wanted to break to. And again, going back to these people who are security minded, but come from different parts of the business, allowing them to actually say, hey, there's something which is risky here, which is broken. and allowing them to actually come up with an idea and put in place a control or an initiative to make things better, that has been that has made a massive impact. And one of our most efficient and impactful security control we put in place has been imagined and implemented by someone who is not part of the security team. So for me, that was a very big win.
Yeah, that's a major sign when it, like you say, the first part very much an example of the security team and kind of improving their approach to it. But if you're starting to tap into the wider part of the company, that's it. Then that's when you're on the money, isn't it? So no, that makes sense. And what you've kind of mentioned all the way through the podcast, but we've not really addressed yet, is very subtle telltale signs towards more of the psyche, more of the soft skills. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is that just as important as a player? Understanding, having that, I suppose, that emotional intelligence as a boss to kind of tap into, or psychological towards security. Am I right? Have I gone too far? What's your thoughts on that?
No, I think psychological safety is definitely a big topic in lots of companies in general, but the security also has its part to play in this. And for example, if we take something that every CISO or security team has experienced, is the classic phishing exercise that you run. And obviously the objective of this is to test our the staff in the company and allow them to experience a lifelike phishing campaign that they could receive from an attacker. And I think the problems I've seen with that is often this is done in conjunction with a tendency to want to shame, name and shame maybe the people who have clicked or who have been, who fell for the phishing, or creating some kind of idea that if they do fail the test, then they will get into trouble. If they do this repeatedly, they might be pointed out as repeat offenders, and that could have an impact on their employability. And I think that creates a number of issues for me. The first one is that you often end up being perceived by the rest of the company as the team who's trying to trick people into clicking on their test and and getting them into trouble. And that the problem with that is that it undermines the trust that your fellow colleagues have in you, and it kind of also discourages collaboration. You don't want to collaborate with a team who's there trying to trick you in doing something that will make them look bad.
Yep.
And the second issue is that if they actually do click on a real phishing email, they have less of an incentive to report it, because reporting it can be seen as getting them into trouble. So at the end of the day, you've got people who want to engage less with you and who will have a tendency not to want to report the early signs of a security incident. So you've kind of lost on both accounts, in my view.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry.
No, I was just kind of say it's that positive and negative sort of reinforcement, isn't it? I remember even just as a kid, like you say, sometimes you get in trouble, and you don't need to go fess up. But if you fess up, you're going to be in more trouble. But then I think there was one time where I must have kicked a ball into my neighbour's garden or something like that, and I think I told my mum and dad, and they were like, all right, it's fine, let's go get it. And then it was like that positive thinking, all right, okay, maybe if you fess up, you get your ball back, you know what I mean? And it's as happy as that. It's reinforcements, and that's what you mean. You'll bring it back into its human behaviour, and it doesn't just have to be cybersecurity focused. It's human behaviour, and reinforcement towards action. So yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely, and I think the thing is, some people I've seen, I've been reading up on this a bit, and I've seen some people take the stance let's drop phishing exercises because of the reasons I've just listed. And I think that is not necessarily the answer, because they do bring a lot, because it's, if you want people to be good at something, you have to allow them to test and train, but just do it in a safe way. So I think that there's just different ways of reaching the same aim, but just doing it in a way where, rather than focusing on the people who have clicked, focus also on the way people have responded to it. Because essentially, if you have people, even one person who reports it very early on, that gives you the time to react as a security team, to maybe take the emails out of other people's inboxes, or block them at the malicious website, or do all kinds of things. And actually, that's a better measure of how your company responds to these kind of attacks, rather than like, this person clicked 3 hours in and did that. Actually, yes, that is a problem, but let's also recognize how good the company overall reacted and how quickly they did, etc. So there's lots of different ways to do this in a way where people still feel safe working in your company.
Yep. And my last question to you, Vincent, is it is a bit of a tricky one. It's like, where do you sort of rank, if I had to make you choose a decision, I'm being very narrow-minded and I'm making you pick sort of one, rather than take a holistic approach. In terms of importance, where you sort of put in having a good security culture? Because obviously, someone can come into a company and go, right, I want to have the best vendors, or I want to have the biggest budget so that I can hire everyone and get the best toolings. Like, in terms of security culture, where do you put it against all the other variables that go on in running, a security ship?
I think, it's hard to, I wouldn't say, you can achieve everything with a security culture and no, you don't need any budget, you don't need any tools or controls. I think that would be pushing it a bit far. But I do think definitely that a strong culture is much better than just having the budget, but of having a very weak culture. Because again, when people don't trust you, when people are not engaged with security, all that happens is you've got a great control here, but actually 50% of your staff are kind of going around it because it doesn't suit them, or they don't understand why we're doing it, or actually the way the company operates makes this super smart control you had in place irrelevant, and you're the only one who doesn't know about this. So I don't know if I could really answer your question, but I definitely put security culture at the very top, because at the end of the day, the company is operated by humans who make decisions, 5,000 times a day, and therefore kind of embedding in their brains the importance of what they do and helping them recognize what's the best way to do these, to make these decisions. I think that's what makes a very big difference.
Yep. No, and I purposely put you in a box there. Obviously, it will be better to be holistic and have more approaches. But I just wanted to see how you would answer that. So cool, Vincent. Thank you so much, mate. For anybody who's interested, Vincent's also wrote a blog on this as well. So when I post this video out, I'll also put a link to that in there as well. I'll also put all Vincent's details so that you can reach out to him directly as well. But other than that, mate, you've been absolutely right. And thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much, Nick.